but I really like to grab people's emotions inside. I like the visual elements to come out. I like the imaginary stuff, and I like you to get lost in the podcast.
Rue, start the show! I'm Beatrice, your badass branding strategy girl, and welcome to the Art of Branding Badassery podcast. Rue expects your best branding game. You don't want to miss out on 95% of your audience, do you?
You start a podcast. It's fun. Let's do it. Let's be badass.
Today, we're deep diving into the elements in branding podcast for success, and we've got on a passionate as heck podcast and sound wizard who's also the mastermind producer behind the curtains of the Art of Branding podcast and more. Thank you so much for joining, Elijah Drown.
Thanks for having me, Beatrice. That's cool. That's good at intro. Solid mastermind I have to live up to. That's a lot of pressure. I don't know if I can do that, but thank you.
You're already there. What are you talking about? Like, your stuff is badass. And seriously, you've done some amazing behind the scenes work on this podcast, and I can't thank you enough. How have you found being the producer of the Art of Branding?
I think once we got a rhythm, it was good, but it was really interesting for me to bring Beatrice to a level where she's like, I don't know. I don't even know if you listen to podcasts much. You listen to a few, which is great, but you're not like a connoisseur, right? So you would expect to know exactly what to do. So we kind of went from, I've heard about podcasts. I like talking. This will be cool. And then we kind of worked through the whole process. Like, and now, what is it, 15 episodes in or something like that? You're like, that's too many ums. I didn't like that guest for umming and ahhing too much. You remove more. It's ridiculous. Like, and then beginning, it's like, I talked, I recorded, woo, and then the progression is awesome. That's what I love. And I think I really like, in some ways, having that creative freedom. You're like, I don't know what to do. You do, have fun. And now you're complaining that I didn't do enough of the removals, which is hilarious. I love that. Now you're getting into your groove, you're doing your thing. And you're like, no, I know what I want now. I know how it should sound. And I know from a branding standpoint on my podcast, exactly what I want, which is awesome.
That's incredible. I mean, just over 15, 16 episodes that it's come that far. So.
Have you slept in those 16 episodes at all? Because you do everything else too.
Anyone? Like,
slept as in,
slept.
One of those.
No. I just work straight through. And
it's nice hustle.
Well, you've gone from analog to digital. What's your radio to podcast journey been like?
Forever and a day is probably the accurate way. It's been 20 years. I went to school and don't judge me, 2003 for radio broadcasting. Did the diploma thing, the community college thing, the specialty. And then I did some co-op. I didn't love it. It was too political. And I was young enough that I had stronger opinions than I do now. And I had an ego. So I kind of left that game. I did get out with some friends who said, you live with your parents too long. You need an apartment. We need to share one. We need to get out and live. And then we started internet radio station, which we were all kind of nerdy. So it was fine. That was before Spotify, anything. And you had to set up your own computer somewhere, like a server machine, to do everything, and then literally have a remote radio station with all the software and automation and stuff, and nerd out and played some music. We did indie music, which was a bad idea because nobody cares about local music unless they really know it and resonate with it. You want to hear AC/DC, you want to hear, I don't know, Joan of Arc or whatever it is, or Taylor Swift, right? You want to hear that stuff because you're familiar with it. But we're going, it's not making any money or doing anything because people just don't resonate with these artists. So that was a huge lesson, but it was awesome. We had a coding guy, we had a business guy, and then me, the voice of the Duke radio, as we called it. And my mom still has the clipping from the local paper, which is adorable.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Fast forward a lot. So I had kids. I did a career. I work in finance, tech, and I talk all day. That's the joke because I'm an analyst and I'm like the glue or the rock of the project. And I'm just kind of navigating everything and trying to make sure everybody kind of jives, right?
Mm.
So that's kind of fun. And now I'm listening to people like Beatrice talk all day, all night. I did some podcasts as a hobby. I did a bunch of them every couple of years, but you burn out. You try to do all this stuff because I probably have ADHD. I get excited, I go full tilt, and I'm like, oh, life happened. I can't do it. So here I am trying to step back. My kids are old. I'm old, so it's fun time to get going. And I think I have the maturity and the patience to let this stew a bit professionally to really get going. So I've
Yeah.
seen a lot. I've done a lot with the tech, and I've seen things where I was like, when I was your age, I used to do the podcast feeds manually. Like you actually had to code the thing, and the tags and all that, and then send it out. And now here you are, you just click a button and you complain because your browser hates you. And I hated it because I didn't know what I was doing. And then you have to fuddle because it didn't go to Podcast Avenue, wherever. Like, goddamn, so here we are. Get off my lawn moment. A bit of a journey.
Exactly. Well, as you said, text made it easier for anyone to really dive in. Do you think that
Yeah.
accessibility is a blessing or a curse for podcast quality? And how do you tackle it as a producer?
I hate it. I mean, it's great for people who remove the barriers. You just want to talk and you want to have freedom. You want to develop communication. You want to have a good time. You just want to get out there and feel like you have more friends than you do on social media. Awesome. And a lot of people like to talk about their hobbies with their friends, and that's kind of how they connect remotely, especially during COVID. You saw podcasts go through the roof.
Hmm.
The downside to removing all these barriers is that there's no training required. There's no technical knowledge required. There's no desire for things to be perfect. People just kind of go, well, it's my first one. If somebody's farting in the background constantly, I don't care because I have a podcast. And it's silly, but that's kind of how it is. You can see a slew of really great podcasts. I don't love Joe Rogan, but his podcast audio quality, like on point. He's all over the place, but he has a specific niche. He's a
Hmm.
little out there and people love that. But then you have I don't know, Sally Jane, who's doing a podcast that just want to talk and ramble for 4 hours about her cats. I can't do it. So that it's a bit of an unpopular opinion, but that's how I see it.
I love that. And you did an amazing job with the podcast intro for the art of branding. And there's
Hmm.
such a hit or skip to keep people from to keep people listening, right? So what's your secret to making sure the intro hooks listeners and sets the tone?
If you dig into the nerdy side of things, I like theater of the mind. So Dungeons and Dragons for me, role playing adventure games, I love that because you picture everything that's navigating the world. Everything is imaginary. Or you read a book and you visualize all of the characters yourself. Some people just talk through an intro or a trailer, just straight goods, straight to the point, and that's their style. But I really like to grab people's emotions inside. I like the visual elements to come out. I like the imaginary stuff, and I like you to get lost in the podcast. So that's where I like the intro to be consistent, on point, and say, "Hey, I this is the real deal. I shit you not. I'm here to play, and this is how it's going to sound every time. You're going to be excited. I'm the best that I can be, and here's why." And that's exactly what I tried to do with yours. This is badass. We're having some fun. Rue is going to kick your ass if you're not showing up every day, and then we're going to get started. And we had a lot of fun with that, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
Cracking the bat, the guy screaming because you broke his leg because he's not badass enough. He's one of those 95% that sucks, and you're not here to suck. So that was kind of fun. And then the music, you're like, I need something that rocks. And we found something like, okay, we tried EDM because you used to go to the club a lot, dancing to country music. I don't know. That's your thing. And then we went to hard rock, which was good compromise. Yeah.
So if somebody is trying to do their own intro, for example, and trying to make it in line with their brand, what would you suggest that they do?
I wouldn't say go all out all the time. If you have the
Mhm.
skills to kind of layer music and sounds and do that stuff, it's certain personalities, say for my podcast, I'm starting called Let's Start a Podcast to help people feel more comfortable. My personality, my persona on LinkedIn or wherever is kind of quirky and out there. So I want something that's creative and really pulls you in because you expect me to be weird and wonderful. So I'm going to have all of that stuff that plays into my personality in that intro or podcast trailer. But for someone starting out, you really just need to say, hey, this is the podcast, this is what I'm about, and this is what to expect, and just record it. As long as it sounds audible, clear, and concise, and there's nothing distracting in the background, you're good. And if you want to put some music behind it just to kind of jazz it up or whatever you're doing, kind of create a vibe, that's cool. But you don't need to go 120% all out. Just keep it simple. And then when you get the skills, you can build on that.
Exactly. And you can really start to align it to how your brand grows, right? So as it
Yeah.
develops, as you understand, it becomes clearer.
Especially when you get a moment at 3 a.m., say, I'm going to start a podcast at 8 because I don't like to sleep. I get excited. Let's do it. And you just kind of wing it. And then you can kind of figure it as you go. I don't condone that, but to each their own.
Well, speaking of mistakes, which that probably would be, I can imagine you've seen a lot. And what kind of mistakes have you seen that would kill a podcast quicker than brew on an espresso or espresso rather?
I love going to the podcast subreddits on Reddit and listening to those questions. I don't want to crap on those people. I don't want to say that they're bad or unknowing, but there's a ton of junk and jargon and stuff you can just Google out there. So they'll come to Reddit because they trust the community. That's where the nerds live. That's where the podcast obsessions happen. And they go, what should I do here or this or how many random questions? A lot of people just go, I put out a podcast episode, nobody's showing up, and then they sit there and wait, and then they cry to themselves and they cry to sleep. So the planning really is lacking. A lot of people burn out after 6 months because they don't plan. They just kind of go, podcasts are fun, I like talking. They don't realize it's a long game. And when you get back to the analog, if you will, in radio land, you hear all these announcer people, they're trained and they always have a plan on what they're talking about, weaving in, talking about some music, connecting things, doing sweet segues, whatever it is, they have a plan. And the sales team, they need to fit in the ads and all this stuff, whole thing. Even when you go to Crime Junkies podcast, they have a plan.
Hmm.
They plan out their episodes. They do a lot of research to figure out who done it, if I may, and go from there. But the people, I think the biggest mistake is just showing up and going without a clue of what you're going to do in the future because you're just setting yourself up for disappointment.
So, in that case, what elements would you suggest as to consider as a part of a plan, initially at
There's
least?
there's ton of details out there, but you really just want to figure out on what the sound's going to be like. You want to plan out probably a good 10 episodes to get a feel of what you're going for. You try, everybody says find your why and find your audience, but you may not know who your audience is until you just figure it out. So for the first 10, maybe you just go to bat and say, hey, I'm just going to give this a shot. Am I good at this? Am I going to work out the kinks? And you can go from there. You might want to have some sort of idea from a branding standpoint. Get the title going, get the description going, get the kind of the whole feeling, the vibe. And even if you have to draw a little circle with a bunch of lines all over the place, just get brainstorming and figure out something concrete that you get going at. Figure out kind of who you want to talk to, who will actually talk with you, and what kind of style. Do you want to interview someone? Do you want to talk to yourself at the wall like you do on social media? I love that. I love blogging to myself every day. It's fun. And then you go and you can do little clips in between. You can do co-host style. You can do a whole panel, all that crazy stuff. So if you have a rough idea of how you want to present yourself, what you want to do in, say, a couple months, and then how you're going to go about that. That's probably the best way to go about things. And please do not record from your iPhone. Do not. End
That
rant.
that's another mistake right there. That like recording from your iPhone.
It's not a mistake, but it sounds, if you don't even have headphones, you can hear how echoey it is and all the static, and then it kind of gets loud and distorted, and my ears start to bleed. And that's not fun for everybody. Some people like that. That's their thing. Not for me.
So
Whatever.
invest in a
Yeah,
microphone, definitely.
please. Or something like yours. You have the little wireless doodad that plugs into your iPhone. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, it works. It's a
Does a trick.
easy thing. And so I know that we've spoken a lot about different styles of episodes. So, this
Mm,
art of branding, there's the solo episodes, there's with guests, there's different styles. So what do you
yeah.
think about mixing things up?
I love that there's no right answer. This is like acting or creative state. And people who aren't creative, they don't get when I go, "What do you think? What do you want to do?" And they go, "What?" But there has to be an answer. There's not. Ta-da! So that's nice. And then you have, in your example, the Art of Branding podcast, you have interview style. So you're asking people questions. And then every 3 or 4 episodes down, you kind of just recap or restate everything to kind of bring the point home and figure out why Beatrice means business, why she's badass, and what it all means tied together. The fun part about that is that even though it's a solo episode, we brought in some clips from the past 3 or 4 episodes, those juicy truth bombs, as kids like to say. That's integrated in there. So you have you talking, and then we break it up with somebody's magic moment, and then you keep going to kind of bring the point home. I like that mix where it doesn't have to be a certain style. You just kind of figure out how your message is going to resonate with your audience. And if you want to bring in some clips like you're a news reporter, you know how they do that on TV, or you have maybe you just kind of bring in somebody, you have a guest temporarily, or you just pre-plan your questions if you're not a great communicator, and then you can always edit that answer in later and kind of weave it in. And as you get better at the editing skills, you'll figure out how to make it sound a little more natural instead of bloop, oh, there's an answer. It's less jarring.
I freaking love that. And now to go to the opposite end of mixing things up, what would you put as the top three elements for every potential podcaster or even anyone considering doing audio, video that they should consider to make their brand pop and
Hmm.
listenable through, especially now with so many people, so many ears out there.
Yeah. I listen with my eyes. It's okay, Beatrice. So we have it's magic. It's masterclass in podcasts, but we have a few things you want to consider. Have the basic equipment, something that isn't a cheap knockoff that's $4, something $50 is fine. Even headphones or earbuds, the Bluetooth stuff, they work great, or your device. Have the basic equipment so that you at least can be heard and you don't have to yell to be heard and to be sound. Make it sound like we're just talking, having a good time, because you want to sound relaxed and confident and comfortable. You want to have a bit of a knowledge of podcasts. So I just kind of, even if you look at the top 10, top 100 podcasts, just randomly pick one or ask your friends and family, what's a good podcast to listen to? Have an idea what's going on, and then figure out how to be a decent communicator. People like to babble about themselves, which is terrific. I love to talk about myself, but you need a lot of constraint. So if you're the host, the old adage is 2 ears, one mouth. It's silly, but if you listen twice as much as you talk, you should be okay. The trick about podcasting and hosting is that you have to figure out how to be a good communicator and also figure out what you're going to say next. So you have to listen and think about what you're going to say, which is a bit of a multitasking juggernaut if you're not used to it. So I added a fourth. I'm sorry, but those are important things to kind of consider and practice. Even if you sit in front of a mirror and figure out how you sound and your body language is, then at least you'll feel more comfortable and confident going in. It's a good
Exactly.
list.
And so we started talking about the past. Now,
Oh,
in terms of the future, what trends do you predict for the podcasting universe, and how can podcasters future proof their shows while staying true to their brand essence?
video. People like to use the term video podcast, which, as a truist, it drives me insane because it's not. It's just a video. Whatever. I'll ride the coattails of others because that's what people understand it as. That's what society's called it. So we're recording on video. It's a bit
Mhm.
of a waste to not use that video. And although podcast is a long game on Apple and Spotify, YouTube is a bit of a search engine. TikTok is a bit of a search engine. Same with Instagram ish. It used to be more, but now it's kind of pushed to TikTok. Use the video. That's the trend that I see. Different techniques and things like that, I don't think will change. People are still trying to figure it out. And believe it or not, there's still plenty of opportunity to monetize. Just got to be patient. So get on YouTube, figure out if you don't have the capacity to pay somebody, get on the AI tools and get some clips and just pump them out because people want to see, people want to use their senses more, especially with VR and AR and all that fun jazz. You'll probably be able to smell a podcaster pretty soon. That's the way the future, I think, is going. It's nuts, but the tech is really coming around. So because we have the removing the barrier to tech, it's easy to press record on video and audio. You can rip the audio off the video, and you're now in two places. That's the video trend I see.
Damn, that'd be scary as heck. Like being able to smell the podcasters. It might be a good thing and a bad thing.
Well, especially if you did your episodes after the gym, like I don't want that. It's nuts. Like I'll celebrate working on thighs with you, but the smells from that, or I take my dog for a run. No thanks, not happening.
So how
No,
would
not
you
for me for now.
how would you compare that in that case to vlogs? Would you say that's a similar sort of thing, like video podcasts, vlogs, or something totally different?
I remember Vines. Were you old enough for Vines? The 7 second things, or am I really that old? Maybe I'm too old. That was like the beginning of social media where people were really excited, those vlogs. But there's different things that people do, and whatever you want to call them. People will go on the street, they'll go kind of more uh, guerrilla style,
Yeah.
if you want to call that, a mirror in your face and like, hey, tell me about the time your dad didn't know about you sleeping with whatever, or that you stole something like this stuff, the clickbait stuff. And whatever, kids love it. I'm old. I don't get it. I think that vlogs are similar. I think that you can take the trans- transcription with the AI tools generated and the tech, whether it's Descript or Riverside, you can get all that content written form now. So you did your podcast, you rip out the or get the transcript, and then you can put that on your, I don't know, use it for a script for your vlog, use it for a blog, website, social media quotes of the day, and more talking about yourself. It's nice. And then you can really get out there. So repurpose the content, use it. Get on YouTube, get on Apple, get on anywhere you possibly can, because we all love the cryptic CEO component that nobody understands. And transcripts are supposed to help with that. The more words, the better. And if you already have it, you have the ability to get it through AI tools. Why not use it?
Hex, yeah, love that. So there's one question that I ask everyone, and I'm sure you're well versed on it by now. And that is, what's the biggest societal norm that you want to push back on and teach others about?
Stop copying everybody else. Stop trying to be somebody else. Seriously, there's so many celebrities and people out there. We glorify the celebrity. They're just people. Yeah, they make $1 million because they're a little unhinged and they're creative. That's nice. But that's not the point of, being like somebody else. Just be you. Do your thing. Be confident and brave enough. It takes a lot of work, inner work, to do your own thing, but just do it. You can be influenced by people. That's totally cool. But if you're flat out being like them, like whatever. There's people that go to Comic Cons or whatever that dress up in super nerd costumes, which is awesome. Good for them. And for a day, they can have a dose of unreality if you want. But every day gets kind of weird, gets kind of unusual, and need to put in the work because there's something missing inside. So for me, a bunch of people walking around with their heads down, their phones, they're looking at their celebrities, wishing I could be like them. Why don't you just focus on being you? If you don't have a bazillion bucks, who cares? Make the best of it. Do your thing. Or just make a podcast and then you can pretend you have friends. Yeah.
Hex, yeah, I'm sure Rue would get in on that any day. Well, thank you again for joining, Elijah. And how can people reach you?
LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, talk podcasts with me. There is links in the bios of all the social medias, contact information, see my portfolio, figure out what I'm doing, and look at all the videos where I'm kind of cringy and weird and wonderful. Hope you enjoy it.
Love it. Thank you. So those details will also be in the episode description, and drop any questions you'd like answered about the show in the comments, and of course, stay badass.